Study Session 5, Cognitive Development. Introduction. Changes in mental abilities such as learning, memory, reasoning, thinking and language are aspects of intellectual development. Cognitive development involves changes in cognitive process and abilities. These changes are closely related to both motor and emotional development. In this study session, we will explore the conclusions of Jean Piaget on cognitive development. Piaget's stage theory describes the cognitive development of children. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to 1. Explain cognitive development. 2. Mention the different stages of Piaget's cognitive development. 3. Discuss the relevance of the theory to everyday life. And 4. Give 2 of the criticisms of the theory. Jean Piaget, 1952, Theory of Cognitive Development. Jean Piaget was born in Switzerland in 1896. He developed an interest in the intellectual development of children. Based upon his observation, he concluded that children were not less intelligent than adults. They simply think differently. Let's consider the following key concepts. Schemas. A schema describes both the mental and physical actions involved in understanding and knowing. Schemas are categories of knowledge that help us to interpret and understand the world. In Piaget's view, a schema includes both a category of knowledge and the process of obtaining that knowledge. As experiences happen, this new information is used to modify, add to, or change previously existing schemas. For example, a child may have a schema about a type of animal, such as dog. If the child's sole experience has been with small dogs, a child might believe that all dogs are small, furry, and have 4 legs. Suppose then that the child encounters a very large dog. The child will take in this new information, modifying the previously existing schema to include this new information. Assimilation. This is the process of taking in new information into our previously existing schema. The process is somewhat subjective because we tend to modify experience or information somewhat to fit in with our pre-existing beliefs. In the example above, seeing a dog and labeling it dog is an example of assimilating the animal into the child's dog schema. Accommodation. Another part of adaptation involves changing or altering our existing schemas in light of new information, a process known as accommodation. Accommodation involves altering existing schemas or ideas as a result of new information or new experiences. New schemas may also be developed during this process. Equilibrium. Piaget believed that all children try to strike a balance between assimilation and accommodation, which is achieved through a mechanism Piaget called equilibrium. As children progress through the stages of cognitive development, it is important to maintain a balance between applying previous knowledge, assimilation, and changing behavior to account for new knowledge, accommodation. Equilibrium helps explain how children are able to move from one stage of thought into the next. Stages of development. Sensorimotor stage. Birth to 2 years. The first stage of Piaget's theory lasts from birth to approximately age 2 and is centered on the infant trying to make sense of the world. During the sensorimotor stage, an infant's knowledge of the world is limited to their sensory perceptions and motor activities. Behaviors are limited to simple motor responses caused by sensory stimuli. Children utilize skills and abilities they were born with, such as looking, sucking, grasping, and listening, to learn more about the environment. Substages of the sensorimotor stage. The sensorimotor stage can be divided into 6 separate substages that are characterized by the development of a new skill. These stages are reflexes, primary circular reactions, secondary circular reactions, coordination of reactions, tertiary circular reactions, and early representational thoughts. Reflexes from 0 to 1 month. During this stage, the child understands the environment purely through inborn reflexes, such as sucking and looking. The next stage is the primary circular reactions that spans between 1 and 4 months. This substage involves coordinating sensation and new schemas. For example, a child may suck his or her thumb by accident and then later intentionally repeat the action. These actions are repeated because the infant finds them pleasurable. Third stage, secondary circular reactions between 4 and 8 months. During this substage, the child becomes more focused on the world and begins to intentionally repeat an action in order to trigger a response in the environment. For example, a child will purposefully pick up a toy in order to put it in his or her mouth. The next substage is the coordination of reactions. That's between 8 and 12 months. Here, the child starts to show clearly intentional actions. The child may also combine schemas in order to achieve a desired effect. Children begin exploring the environment around them and will often imitate observed behavior of others. Understanding of objects also begins during this time. Tertiary circular reactions between 12 and 18 months. At this substage, children begin a period of trial and error experimentation. For example, a child may try out different sounds or actions as a way of getting attention from a caregiver. Early representational thoughts, 18 to 24 months. Children begin to develop symbols to represent events or objects in the world in the final sensorimotor substage. During this time, children begin to move towards understanding the world through mental operations rather than purely through actions. Pre-operational stage, 2 to 6 years of age. The pre-operational stage occurs between ages 2 and 6. Language development is one of the hallmarks of this period. Piaget noted that children in this stage do not yet understand concrete logic, cannot mentally manipulate information, and are unable to take the point of view of other people, which he termed egocentrism. During the pre-operational stage, children also become increasingly adept to using symbols, as evidenced by the increase in playing and pretending. For example, a child is able to use an object to represent something else, such as pretending a broom is a horse. Role-playing also becomes important during the pre-operational stage. Children often play the roles of mommy, daddy, doctor, and many others. Egocentrism. According to Piaget, children experience this difficulty because they are unable to take on another person's perspective. Piaget used a number of creative and clever techniques to study the mental abilities of children. One of the famous egocentrism techniques involved using a three-dimensional display of a mountain scene. Children are asked to choose a picture that showed the scene they had observed. Most children are able to do this with little difficulty. Next, children are asked to select a picture showing what someone else would have observed when looking at the mountain from a different viewpoint. Invariably, children almost always choose the scene showing their own view of the mountain scene. This is because children are not able to view things from other people's point of view. Conservation. This involves a child's understanding of conservation. In one observation experiment, equal amount of liquid are poured into two identical containers. The liquid in one container is then poured into a different shaped cup, such as a tall and thin cup or a short and wide cup. Children are then asked which cup holds the most liquid. Despite seeing that the liquid amounts were equal, children almost always choose the cup that appears fuller. Piaget conducted a number of similar experiments on conservation of number, length, mass, weight, volume, and quantity. Piaget found that few children showed any understanding of conservation prior to the age of 5. Concrete operation stage, 7 to 11 years. The concrete operational stage begins around age 7 and continues until approximately age 11. During this time, children gain a better understanding of mental operations. Children begin thinking logically about concrete events, but have difficulty understanding abstract or hypothetical concepts. Logic. Piaget determined that children in the concrete operational stage were fairly good at the use of inductive logic. Inductive logic involves going from a specific experience to a general principle. On the other hand, children at this stage have difficulty using deductive logic, which involves using a general principle to determine the outcome of a specific event. Reversibility. One of the most important developments at this stage is an understanding of reversibility, or awareness that actions can be reversed. An example of this is being able to reverse the order of relationships between mental categories. For example, a child might be able to recognize that his or her dog is a Labrador, that a Labrador is a dog, and that a dog is an animal. Formal operational stage, 12 years to adulthood. The formal operational stage begins at approximately age 12 and lasts into adulthood. During this time, people develop the ability to think about abstract concepts. Skills such as logic thoughts, deductive reasoning, and systematic planning also emerge during this stage. Logic. Piaget believed that deductive logic becomes important during the formal operational stage. Deductive logic requires the ability to use a general principle to determine a specific outcome. This type of thinking involves hypothetical situations and is often required in science and mathematics. Abstract thought. While children tend to think very concretely and specifically at early stages, the ability to think about abstract concepts emerges during the formal operational stage. Instead of relying solely on previous experiences, children begin to consider possible outcomes and consequences of actions. This type of thinking is important in long-term planning. Problem solving. During the formal operational stage, The ability to systematically solve a problem in a logical and methodological way emerges. In earlier stages, children use trial and error method to solve problems. Children at the formal operational stage of cognitive development are often able to quickly plan an organized approach to solving a problem. Criticisms of Piaget's theory of cognitive development. Much of the criticism of Piaget's work is in regards to his research methods. A major source of inspiration for the theory was Piaget's observations of his own 3 children. In addition to this, the other children in Piaget's small research sample were all from well-educated professionals of high socioeconomic status. Because of this unrepresentative sample, it is difficult to generalize his findings to a larger population. Research has disputed Piaget's argument that all children will automatically move to the next stage of development as they mature. Some data suggests that environmental factors may play a role in the development of formal operations. Most researchers agree that children possess many of the abilities at an earlier age than Piaget suspected. Recent research on theory of mind has found that children of 4 or 5 years old have a rather sophisticated understanding of their own mental processes as well as those of other people. For example, children of this age have some ability to take the perspective of another person, meaning they are far less egocentric than Piaget believed. While there are few strict Piagetians, most can appreciate Piaget's influence and legacy. His work generated interest in child development and had an enormous impact on the future of education and developmental psychology. Study session summary. In this study session, you learned that Piaget was a theorist who posited that children learn through actively constructing knowledge through hands-on experience. He suggested that the adult role in helping the child learn was to provide appropriate materials for the child to interact and construct. End of study session 5. Thank you for listening.